Steve, what's the latest?
Well, you know, we haven't had a chance yet on the U.S. markets to get a reaction to this regulatory action over the last 5 or 6 days. Of course, late last week, we got that news that Didi would be put on regulatory review. And then so lightning quickly, the regulators, the cybersecurity regulators in China, put out that edict on Sunday to essentially ban people from downloading the app. And this is a big blow coming just days as well after that big $4.4 billion IPO in New York. And we haven't had a chance to see how investors are going to react. And most analysts are saying they're not going to react very well. We have seen reaction from SoftBank. SoftBank is a backer of Didi, as well as another company that has come into the crossfire, because we're not just talking about Didi right now. I'll get into the other companies in just a second. So it is roiling, you know, global investors. It's a little different than what we saw, of course, with Alibaba/Ant when Ant IPO was suddenly pulled. That was a joint listing in Hong Kong and in Shanghai, not New York. Didi was in New York, and these other companies, which I'm just going to talk about now, in both the trucking business as well as consultancy business, they had listed last month in the United States. So we're seeing the regulators catching up, because a lot of these platforms, obviously, as we explored through the Ant process on Red Lines, the documentary, we might have to have part 2, by the way, now, given this has taken on a next stage. We've essentially seen, of course, Beijing playing catch up to the regulatory lag that has happened, that has allowed a lot of these companies to grow so large and pose a threat, perhaps, to Communist Party rule, as well as Communist Party control of that very sensitive data, which, of course, these Chinese platforms are building troves of.
So is it just playing catch up, though? Because part of the outrage, right, and confusion by investors is just the very specific timing, choosing to crack down just days after this high-profile, massive US listing.
Yeah, it is interesting, the timing and, of course, the companies that are now being targeted. These companies, which include First Truck Alliance, Kanjun, as well as Didi, all have listed in the United States. Remember, Ant was not going to be, and it saved, by cracking down on Ant before their IPO, it saved a lot of losses for domestic retail investors in China. This is hitting global investors quite hard, this latest crackdown. And very interestingly, we're hearing from the Dow Jones Newswires that regulators in China reached out to Didi before the listing in the United States last week, urging them to, A, halt the listing, or at least delay it, and 2, do an extensive review of their network security. Well, I don't know the ins and outs of those discussions, but obviously, as we saw last week, Didi went ahead with their IPO regardless. And I want to read you a comment coming from the Global Times. We haven't gotten statements other than the official announcement from the cybersecurity regulators and other security regulators, but the Global Times, which is, of course, the fairly strident at times state media in China, they put out a sharply worded column yesterday saying, we must never let any internet giant control a super database that has been more detailed personal information than the state, let alone giving it the right to use the data at will. So China must be even stricter in its oversight of Didi's data security, given that it's listed in the United States and its 2 largest shareholders are foreign companies. One of those companies, obviously, is SoftBank, which has sunk to a 15-month low yesterday.